To another space with IONET and CrunchDAO. Hey, Tassif, how's it going?
Hey, Jake, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. You will be joining in just a second. Um, as he is getting connected, Tassif, what is exciting you about the space this week?
Um, yeah, I think there's a lot going on these days in the space. I think, a lot of stuff that's unfortunately geopolitical in nature. You probably saw the Nvidia news yesterday, but I think that stuff will probably get through. But yeah, I think in terms of like cool stuff this week was just at RenderCon in LA yesterday. So it was the first ever conference hosted by Render, which is one of our good partners. Really interesting stuff that they're working on in terms of video rendering and visual effects, and they kind of highlighted a lot of like really great use cases that they had with some really major partners like Star Trek and NASA, and they even showed that the intro sequence for Severance was actually made on Render, which I thought was really, really cool. So always exciting to see partners succeed like that.
Great, thanks. Gene, I think you're with us now.
Yes, hello guys.
Hey, how's it going? I'll ask you in a second what excites you in the space, but just want for you to give a intro about your role at CrunchDAO and just what CrunchDAO does.
Yeah, thank you, mate, and thank you everyone that's joining. I'm Jean, I'm founder and CEO of Crunch. We are building, literally, we're trying to build a Palantir with 0 employees. When I say a Palantir, it means that we're building machine learning models for institutional players. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years. We work with one of the largest sovereign wealth funds on the planet, one of the largest investment bank in Australia. We've been working with Harvard and MIT, the Broad Institute, in cancer research as well. And so the way Crunch is working is pretty basic. You have large institutional that are sharing their data on the platform. And on the other side, you have 8,000 members of our community that are building machine learning models, pushing the code on Crunch. And then our customer can trigger our API to access these pieces of code. And we are here today because finally we are finding a way to incorporate decentralized compute, and we can finally store this pieces of code somewhere. But I guess we're going to dive deeper into what is super exciting for me with this partnership. But in a quick word, Crunch is a small army of data scientists around the world, let's say, that is building models for large institutions, bank, hedge funds, and research lab.
Gene, let me ask you the first question about it, which is what inspired CrunchDAO's formation, and interested on how that partnership continues that vision.
Yeah, thanks. Well, a lot of inspiration on the front. There are a lot of communities in the world. The Web3 community is huge, but there always used to be a huge machine learning engineer, kind of data scientist community as well. I don't know if you heard of a project like a Kaggle back then with 1 million of data scientists. You have other project like Numerai back then that was running a hedge fund with a crowd of data scientists, big inspiration for us. Then you had Quantopian that was basically harvesting trading models for these large hedge funds in the US. Same thing, community of people around the world building mathematical tool for this large institution. And it's also coming from a personal standpoint because I have a background in stats and math, and then I started building models in the insurance industry. And after that, and I mean, what was particular when you build a model today in a team is that you are in a small team of researcher inside an office, and it's just a nightmare because the tech is going so fast that you try to always catch up with the latest techniques, but the space is moving faster and faster. It was already moving faster 10 years ago, but now it's even crazier. So it's a big struggle for smaller team to kind of compete with the state of the art. So Crunch is coming to this conclusion where we try to prove that instead of working with an internal team, you better share your data somewhere and work with the whole world, because there is talents all over the planet. And I was kind of struggling as well building these models with these teams. It was performing, but not to the place I would have liked this algorithm to perform. And there is so many banks and so many companies that are currently in this situation. And guys, I mean, there is algorithm everywhere in what we're doing. I'm talking about learn to rank algorithm, ranking whatever you're going to see on the internet, whatever you're going to order on Amazon, or whatever you're going to order on Uber. It's you're using Google Map every day. You have recommendations. You looking at Twitter. Everything you buy, everything you see, everything you listen is kind of governed by algorithm today. And so we don't realize how much improvement we can bring to this algorithm by how much value we can create by making this algorithm better. Some company build their whole mode on this algorithm, right? I don't know, sometimes listen music on Spotify, maybe the recommender is better than what you can find on YouTube, right? Kinds of created what Spotify is. Same thing for Netflix, right? The movie you watch out there is governed by an algorithm that looks at what you like, what the people like you liked, and etc. So yeah, it's a combination of a lot of inspiration from other projects and some of the pain that we were facing as well in the industry and in my personal practice.
Yeah, Tassif, let me hand it over to you. Speaking on the mission of IO, which you've talked about previously, how does this partnership fit into what John is talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a few different ways that the partnership between us at IONet and CrunchDAO really makes sense, right? And I think it's sort of due to both of us approaching, sort of a similar problem set with a very sort of aligned ethos of decentralization, right? So I think at IONet, we're specifically in the business of offering decentralized compute in a very cost-effective and flexible manner, thus kind of really democratizing access to one of the hardest sort of like commodities to get, which is sort of high-end enterprise grade compute. And I think very similarly, what CrunchDAO is trying to do is really sort of coming at a more kind of like vertical or functional based approach to it, right? When it comes to sort of like predictive analytics and predictive intelligence and how it applies to a variety of different verticals that might traditionally have been, have had like high barriers to entry, like especially when you're talking about things like data science and finance and, like quant strategies and things like that. So I think the way sort of CrunchDAO really comes at making a lot of these predictive models competitive and accessible to all in based on sort of how they're structured and how they're incentivized across community members. It's sort of a natural fit in terms of being able to enable that type of use case on a foundation of decentralized compute, right? Because whatever CrunchDAO sort of community members and sort of community of 8,000 data scientists really need, it fundamentally drives into sort of like a massive need for compute to be actually be able to enable that level of sort of predictive intelligence modeling and evolution and development. So I think in terms of how both of our projects kind of really fit together, I think that's sort of like a very natural sort of sync that exists between IO and CrunchDAO, because we're kind of decentralizing and sort of making accessible kind of traditionally really hard to access commodities or type of intelligence.
John, there's something I want to pick up that Tassif said about use cases. Can you dive in and explain what are use cases that would exist for CrunchDAO now that you're working with, and then who you think this most applies to in terms of sectors, both in Web 2 and Web 3?
Yeah, well, first I maybe zoom out a bit, because we talk about AI a lot, and I'm talking a lot about models, and let me just specify what are we talking about. It's models are kind of the building blocks of building artificial intelligence system, right? So when you work with an LLM now, you ask him a question, you ask it a question, and then to perform a specific task, it may end up implementing a functional models in order to do something. Maybe it's computer vision, maybe it's generative AI modules, maybe it's classifiers, maybe it's rankers, maybe it's whatever is going to need in order to perform that task. So we really work at Crunch on this functional building blocks that are currently unresolved. Because if it's already resolved, then why should we all work on that, right? If it's about recognizing a cat from a dog, we don't need that. If it's about another trading kind of app, that used to be an algorithm, then we don't need that anymore. What we're working on is these use cases that are not resolved or that are currently in a very high competitive state. And so you find this very high competitive space in finance because you have these huge institutions that are competing against each other in order to extract information from the market that is not yet incorporated in the public prices. So they are mining a humongous amount of information, and they are really mature in terms of how they are acquiring this data, how they are storing this data, how do they manipulate this huge amount of data. And some concrete example, we work with one of our customers, this investment bank, shared with us a data set that is 2 petabytes a day of order book data. Can you imagine? It's just like all close to impossible to process, and they are all competing on the same amount of information that is obviously not public and not accessible to the other kind of people. So these 2 petabytes of data, to give you the concrete example, they concern one of the largest markets on the planet, which is Forex. Forex is literally countries exchanging money with each other. And the bank, when you are traveling, let's say abroad, you use your credit card and you are just spending money in another country, but your bank is actually needs to move this money around when you're traveling, or when a business buys something abroad, try to import something or export something, pay some tax abroad, and etc. So we talk about trillions of dollars of volume. Like last time I checked, the overall crypto market volume is about 0.04% of the volume you will find in Forex. So this bank faces huge problem, and Crunch is looking at this at these hundreds of times series in order to help that bank have better execution process in order to save on these millions of transactions that they are doing daily. So it's really something that only applies when you do huge volume. That's one of the use cases we have now. Other use cases in healthcare, for example, the community is looking at cell images in order to predict the expression of some gene that are then correlated with some disease, including cancer. So today there is 2 ways to do that. Either you do a gene transcriptomy, so you take a gene, then you analyze that. It costs a lot. 10x Genomics is listed on NASDAQ, making billions of dollars with these techniques. But another technique is looking at an image of your cell and trying to ask a computer vision algorithm to predict what gene is going to express in that cell. And so if you know what kind of gene may express, you can do some preventive medicine and try to limit the expression of some disease. Then we work on crash detection algorithm. It's not car crash detection, what you try to predict. And this is something we are working on with the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority Lab, is when you look at a time series, you try to predict when it's about to crash, change regime. It could be anything. It could be meteorological data. It could be market data. It could be energy data. It could be anything. But literally, predictive analytics are everywhere. There is not a single field that is not impacted by being able to do better predictive analytics. So there is a lot of work, a lot of things to crunch for us. And one of the main part of building models and running them is actually having computers to do it. So it's a very reductive way to say that, but you need the compute in order to do that. And the main issue is currently the price and the accessibilities of this compute capacity, especially that we need a lot. For example, we will end up reserving like hundreds, or if it's not thousands sometime, of GPU when we need to run all the models of everyone at the same time. And so IonaNet is unlocking that, by allowing us to access a lot of GPUs eventually at a much cheaper price, which make every prediction of everyone valuable, which is not the case. There is kind of a compromise that you need to do. Do I want this guy to run a model? Is this model bringing enough information compared to the compute I'm going to burn? If the compute is cheaper, then you can incorporate more information and more models. So there is plenty of consequences, but I'd say the main one are accessing more GPUs at a cheaper price and incorporating more models in our analytics.
Tusper, let me hand it over to you. John was talking about GPU network and cost as well. How do you identify how this partnership works, and also what hurdles it overcomes, especially when talking about the planning and execution of the partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's quite a few things along that, right? So specifically, I believe that this partnership works really well just because of the pure scale that we're operating at and sort of like the scope of the problems that we're trying to go after, right? So I think first thing I want to touch on is what John mentioned about, I think it was the example with the investment bank and sort of like the 2 petabytes of data a day of like forex information that they're processing. That's no joke in terms of like how much processing power that actually needs, right? Those are really, really complex data sets that evolve daily and have a tremendous amount of throughput and transaction volume. And when it comes to sort of the space as competitive as the finance world and high frequency trading, latency and speed to market kind of really, really become crucial differentiating factors for these organizations to compete and outperform and kind of at the end of the day deliver results to the market and their sort of like fund LPs. And the sort of work that CrunchDAO is doing in terms of actually enabling a lot of their data scientists and community members to be able to build sort of predictive analytic models like that. At the end of the day, requires a tremendous amount of underlying compute power, right? And as that compute power kind of becomes a bottleneck, you really need to kind of start to think about like where can you source that compute power from? How can you get it very flexibly? How can you get it in a cost-effective manner? How can you sort of like reduce latency and sort of make it as quickly as possible to get you sort of analytics for the decisions that you need to make? And I think that's when IoNet kind of comes in on the other side of this partnership. So as CrunchDAO gets more users, drives more adoption, and kind of scales out the needs of what they're trying to build. Us on the underlying foundational layer, we can provide that compute and sort of really help CrunchDAO and its community members and clients and partners really scale, right? So in that way, the way this partnership is really structured is the success of CrunchDAO really sort of is tied to and drives the success of IoNet as well. As more users use CrunchDAO services, they fundamentally also drive more adoption of the underlying decentralized compute that IoNet is offering.
John, let me hand it back to you. Something I'm curious about is, it's clear where the unlock is now. Where do you see the future of decentralized AI? Where is it? Where is CrunchDAO's place in it? And where do you think that the future holds for both?
Well, that's a tricky question because we need to define AI again. But it's tough to answer. Like a lot of people is like most of people cannot really tell you like what we are going to be able to do in the next 2 years and what does it mean and where we are going to be. But for sure, just to give you an image on how things work, like for many years we used, like the majority of the video content that we used to watch was produced by, professional studios. But now, if you count in number of minutes that you're watching, most of the video that we're watching are actually produced by other people, pushing that on social media. And this is something that is applicable to the world of AI, is that the communities can create better tool than what a small centralized team will be able to build. And this, we have verified that a couple of times, and every customer that we've been working for, or every product that we've been looking at, we always beat the expectation, sometimes by 2 digits of what was expected there. And so that's really, I think, in my belief, and I think that's the same saying for IO.NET and many people building in the space, the power of communities is very, very strong. And I also believe that, we always try to single out some individual, and we call them genius, right? But often these people are actually inspired from a community, right? They always be kind of these communities, and some people manage to articulate the ideas of the communities and come with the product that kind of solve that problem or incarnate that vision. But there is always community around things. And crypto is the same thing from the cyberpunk at the beginning, right? There is maybe one of them or a group of them that managed to articulate that into a white paper that then became Bitcoin. But this was drawn from a community. That's kind of the hidden powers of community. So in terms of AI, I do believe that the same mechanic happens, and the product that will come out of the community will be far superior than the product that comes from the company focusing on this same thing than what we see in terms of video. But the content of the community is much funnier and much more relevant often than what you would see coming out of professional studios. So it creates kind of a new category. This is where I see the future of AI. I do believe that we are gonna see something that is really amazing. We are just so lucky to live in this century. Obviously, I would not change time for nothing. And the way these things is built is actually very granular. Like, nobody's gonna own the whole supply chain of building artificial intelligence applications, and Crunch don't want to build everything, right? We have no reason. But the different, the compute is really the base of everything. Before the compute network, you have maybe the hardware builders with literally NVIDIA building this graphic cards. Now, IO.NET is on the top of that, managing how to articulate and give access to all of this. And then on top of that, you have some software provider that allows, libraries and software editor that allows to run these models properly and be performant while doing it. Then finally, on top of that, you will find the data providers that are a big part of the chain. And finally, the application layer, like Crunch is working on the application layers. IO is where it's, the basis of everything that we're building. Otherwise, what we do can't exist without compute. And being able to rely on a decentralized network is much more resilient, much more efficient in so many ways, that it's something that we were expecting for a long time, and it's so relevant for us. So where is AI? Is in communities and in all these building blocks that communities need to build, right? Nobody is owning the full supply chain of things. And if you see, even with OpenAI, for example, people are building application with it. It's not OpenAI that's building the end application. So it's actually just building blocks that are put together. That's my vision. Or let's say my reading of the situation.
And Tassif, let me hand it over to you. Even if we don't think about dates, as John talks about, it's about these ideas of milestone, and one of those is top down versus bottom up in how construction occurs. What other milestones do you think of for the future of the space, and how does this partnership fit in?
Yeah, I think in terms of milestones and sort of like how this partnership is even structured, I kind of really, would go back to sort of what John just mentioned a little bit earlier, right? Um, in terms of community, right? I think that's kind of like the key aspect of, you know, this partnership, but not only this partnership, but also sort of like this broader view of decentralized AI and the vision of sort of like where these things are going to go in the future, right? I kind of really think of it as sort of, decentralized AI is essentially sort of almost like a bet on like the decentralized economy, right? And enabling kind of like broader participation across like a variety of stakeholders, right? So I think the more of those stakeholders that kind of come into this decentralized economy and provide sort of whatever value that they're able to provide, I think those are kind of the milestones to really look for as not only this partnership but the broader space like evolves, right? And when I kind of talk about that stakeholder participation, it can look different across sort of like different projects and across different parts of the decentralized AI economy, right? So whether that's individuals kind of providing compute like specifically to deepens like IONET and enabling that to be utilized across a variety of different people and earning through that, whether that's people contributing that compute for decentralized training runs or inference, whether it's people contributing data sets, whether they're like larger ones or sort of something more personal, their own intelligence, their own tooling, a variety of different ways that they can kind of participate, right? So I think sort of how I see things evolve is really kind of along the lines of how these stakeholders kind of really come together to really push forward, the edge of innovation, whether it's across compute at IONET or whether it's across sort of predictive intelligence and analytics at CrunchDAO, right? So, I think we'll kind of see this broader trend happen um, generally across DAI as well, right? So yeah, I think I just specifically mentioned what the two of us in this partnership are doing, but I think there's a lot of other potential partners that both of us are working with, potential and existing, that kind of really focus on decentralizing the full AI tech stack and fundamentally ensuring that there's no points of failure or sort of, and it's like truly sort of permissionless and censorship resistant. To kind of bring that future vision of DAI to life, right? Which will kind of really help drive a lot more of sort of like the open source development that kind of really lifts all ships, with sort of its like rising tide. So I think those are some of the milestones that I can kind of really see occurring across this partnership and more broadly across the AI. I think kind of at the end of this, like the real sort of holy grail milestone is kind of creating a decentralized economy where people truly have more control over their data, their like models that they use, and sort of really being able to kind of craft exactly how they want to consider their inputs and outputs, especially as it relates to the rest of the world, and not having to sort of filter their view on things through sort of like the lens or bias of centralized incumbents and players like OpenAI and Anthropic and things like that. So those are some of the milestones that I kind of really see coming to life as this partnership and the broader space evolves.
Picking up on that, Gene, this idea of bottom up, one area that you've mentioned is, of course, the amount of data that has to be sifted through. I'm curious about the coordination you have with all of the data scientists in your decentralized network. How does that coordination work, and what are the challenges that you faced as you've built it up?
Well, the number one challenge is really attracting the smartest people in your community, right? And that is not only a Web3 thing, right? Same thing. How do you build the best company in the world? It's just by attracting the best talent into it. Some people are really good at it. And one of the most, I think, the way we found is to put in place the very fair reward mechanism that allows people to not only, get rewarded for building amazing models and and great tools for a customer, but it's also a way to get a piece of the upside of whatever value is going to be created. I'm going to give you a very concrete example here. Kaggle, which is this data science hackathon platform, one of the largest probably, run this competition with Netflix back then in order to build the best possible rankers for movie. And so for a while, and if it's not still the case, the ranker of Netflix was built by the people that participated into this hackathon, and they were a $1 million reward. But if you think about it, there were a team of 6 engineers that competed for like 2 or 3 months in order to build the best product for Netflix. They get $1 million that they divided in 6, but Netflix built the $1 billion company on top of this IP. And so there is a real like disconnection between people that are creating real value, sometimes in companies, and what they get from it. And so what we try to fix at Crunch here is that there is a lot of intermediaries that are just being removed because a customer can, get something solved very quick at a low cost and one of the best quality he could have, because he has 8,000 people competing day and night in order to, get the pool prizes and not only the pool prize for this week, because that will be the problem with Netflix, right? If you get rewarded once. What we did is taking this model one step further. So when someone participates at Crunch, he sends some code, and the code of this model is being hosted and exposed to an API, but never give away to the customer. So that way, every time the customer is going to need a new prediction or a new inference, the builder of the model can get a piece of the reward that is allocated to this epoch of inferences. And so it's kind of creating a side revenues for researcher, right? We have some people that are PhDs in mathematics, in physics, in neuroscience, and these people are sometimes making the sacrifice of wealth to work in what they want. But thanks to Crunch, they can now spend some time on the weekend or at night, when they are out of work or out of their lab, and kind of have a model connected to a $1 billion institution or multi-billion dollar use case. And once they build that, they just deploy this model and they will get rewarded all along the life of that product, really getting a true share of whatever differentiated value we're going to create for the end customer. And that's really the innovation I think Crunch is bringing in terms of how to attract talent, is that spend a bit of time, push your IP there, then your IP is being used every time the customer is calling you, and you will get paid all along the life of that product that's being developed. And so, yeah, again, this partnership and decentralized compute is very important in that piece, because by doing that, we not only reduce the capex of that things, but we also make the reward more bigger for our customer, for our participants, and the crunchers on the platform can get more money instead of spending more money in outrageous costs that we see at AWS and these kinds of central provider that operate almost as some kind of monopolies with very, very high prices that don't make sense. And yeah, the getting some ownership of Crunch is really, I think, what makes the difference and what drives the amazing acquisition we have in terms of talents. And like I said, we have 1,200 PhDs and people that I am amazed every day by seeing the quality of people that are crunching on the platform. They do that because they know that they will be fairly compensated for doing and for putting such an effort. And we don't talk about making a bit of money. We talk about eventually stopping to work. That's what Crunch can bring for some people. If you're good enough at this game, then you will never play it anymore, kind of, right? Because you will receive eventually millions of dollars every year for that use case that you're solving for a large financial institution.
Let me ask about recruitment of talent beyond the incentives. Where are you finding John, the most interest in particular groups, are these with people that have worked in data science, or these people that are interested in it, people that are into the Web3 space? Where are you finding sort of the beachhead for those uses?
Well, there is first and foremost, there is not a lot of people on the planet that can solve this kind of use cases in a very good way. So you kind of have to compromise between having a lot of people and having the best. Having a lot of people may add a bit of noise. I'm talking about the building of the model side of things. So you try to really focus on people that have this passion for analytics. And I don't know what you're doing on the weekend, but some people enjoy going to run, enjoy doing, some kind of sport like tennis or football because you're good at it. You're getting dopamine from that activity. While some people got gifted with mathematical capabilities, right? So they get dopamine from not playing footballs or this kind of thing, but from competing in and building models for Crunch. That's really kind of the chat we're seeing at Crunch is sometimes very orthogonal people, like literally they would never work for any companies. It's pretty much almost what you have in the cybersecurity space, where 99% of the zero-day attack have been done by white hat hackers, right? But nobody's hiring a hacker. Who is hiring a hacker internally? Doesn't exist. Doesn't want to work for you. Like these guys are too free and very really gifted and work as independent. So that's kind of the profile we see being super performant as this people that are not working in these large institutions, but that are way above, the average capabilities in terms of building great machine learning models and stats and maths and etc. And sometimes, I mean, it's so funny. Sometimes we see people with PhD out of MIT being beat by someone first year out of IIT in operation in Delhi or in India, and that's the most meritocratic aspect of it that I think I love and that people really enjoy at Crunch as well. When they come and they compete here, is that doesn't matter what kind of diploma you have. It's really much about, okay, what's your pure capacity, what's your talent, are you capable of gathering the informations, are you capable of training yourself, learning that, and like it's actually at the level of a lot of people to be able to build a model that is going to perform pretty well if you spend the time. And with today's tool, it's pretty feasible. But yeah, you have this hyper competitive kind of people that are not inside the system but outside the system and that really enjoy kind of playing with it, really much like a white hat hacker that will just play into breaking systems just because he gets his dopamine and it's fun from it. That's what we find at Crunch being, the best talent.
And Tassif, let me hand it over to you. The idea of growing talent, because you're speaking to a lot of projects. What do you find in the growth of the space and what IO does, both in the partnership and in the product suite with things like IO Intelligence?
Yeah, I think in terms of talent, I think, you know, the pool of talent that I've just been seeing across, Web3 and decentralized AI in general kind of continues to grow and, sort of grow more sophisticated, right? Um, I think, especially in sort of like this space at the intersection of Web3 and AI, I think we've started to see a lot of um, kind of really smart people who might not have, considered, um, like Web3 as a career path or even just like, like as a part of like their toolkit, coming in to explore sort of what sort of a decentralized and permissionless ethos really enables in terms of AI ML development, right? I think a lot of the things that we have kind of talked about, in terms of like centralized incumbents and sort of like, like centralized points of failure and, like sort of methods of like control and censorship that exist kind of coming from that. I think, these historical themes have have kind of really come to the forefront as we've seen sort of AI become much more mainstream, especially, and kind of like the power around that sort of really become more concentrated in the hands of a few major sort of research labs and big tech giants. I think sort of like that pathway has really kind of shown a lot of very smart AI developers. Some of the risks of that centralized power hoarding, but also kind of really opened their eyes to sort of how a permissionless ethos of Web3 can really kind of create a different way to develop and build AI products and kind of contribute to more of sort of like the open source, models that we've been seeing kind of gain a lot more attention these days. So I think in general, I've kind of seen, the talent pool of people working in Web3 and sort of at the intersection of crypto and AI kind of grow, consistently and kind of bring a lot of people who might not have traditionally been interested in, sort of pure Web3 and sort of whatever they might have heard about sort of Web3 in the previous cycle, to kind of really become more intrigued by what this intersection of AI and blockchain can really offer. And I think, we've even seen some of that come to fruition, even in terms of like the team members and talent that we've hired here at Ionic, right? Like we have people joining us from sort of a variety of sort of like major, AI Web2 companies, whether that's like Lambda or NVIDIA or Cohere, which has been really, really exciting to see sort of like all this talent kind of work in, more of like a traditional Web2 sort of centralized manner and kind of really getting, getting their eyes open in terms of what's possible with Web3 and sort of what kind of innovation we can really drive here.
When we're speaking about use cases from bottom up and getting people in which ideas are based around the hierarchy of creativity and innovation, John, let me ask you, is there a particular sector, you've mentioned science, you've mentioned finance, that excites you as one that you would like to have the CrunchDAO network work on now or in the future?
Yeah. Well, there is many. I would like Crunch to crunch everything. That's kind of the goal, and that's why having an building this army of data scientists makes sense, because we'll be able to crunch as much as possible. But in terms of major industries, I mentioned financial industries is the most mature industry on that front because they started working on this kind of things in the 90s, if it's not 80s. So that's a very good place to drill down and build very strong market fit, strong relationship, drill down the revenue. Then healthcare is obviously very large because a lot of data is being collected and the outcome is potentially huge. Then you will see places that are less expected, but for example, the energy sectors and the capability of predicting something as simple as the speed of wind, let's say, it can have a huge impact in an offshore eolian field, that is operating in the middle of the sea with billions of dollars of infrastructure. You can imagine the impact of understanding the wind and the speed and this kind of prediction can have. Then there is the logistic. The logistic sectors is only about time series. Like I don't know if you heard about this algorithm, which just forget the name, but UPS is using one algorithm for all the deliveries of all the UPS package on the planet. If you can make this algorithm slightly better, you can save so much gas, and save so much time. And just being able to have a slightly better spatial orientation algorithm can save. Then there is plenty of other sectors. No, really, I'm not even mentioning sports analytics, and everything is literally a time series. So it's everywhere now. In terms of market size and maturities of market, we just move in function of that. And so we are really drilling down in finance at the moment. And I love to see us being successful on healthcare as well, because that's the real definition of real world impact. That's going even deeper than not only being a profitable project and be successful on building the best analytical company in the world, but the healthcare implication is really real and even more tangible than having large institutional customer on the financial side, because you have an impact on people's life, and that's really a use case that excites me a lot.
Tassif, you've talked previously on Spaces about the importance of real-time accurate analytics for AI ML learning and model building. I'm interested on any other sectors that might be lesser thought, like Gene mentioned, that excite you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's really hard to kind of nail down like a specific sector just because the functional sort of like step change from the adoption of AI will have kind of like a massive sort of impact on every vertical and industry and function there is out there, right? So in reality, I'm excited to kind of just see how the application of AI really evolves in a variety of different sectors. And I think a lot of it is, probably things that, how it'll actually pan out is probably, something that we can't even really predict or comprehend at the moment, right? But I think a couple that are probably pretty exciting, and I think we'll start to see kind of become more top of mind going forward. I think one is specifically around the application of AI in gaming, right? So I think in terms of sort of gaming as an industry as a whole, obviously has kind of grown tremendously over the past couple decades. I think the application of sort of like AI use cases within gaming will kind of really create sort of like a new paradigm shift in how people sort of interact with video games and think of video games and sort of like think of entertainment in general, right? Like especially when sort of interacting with like AI agents in sort of a more tangible space, or where people can kind of think of agents more tangibly when it comes to sort of like a gaming environment, right? And I think a lot of the sort of how gaming really works right now, which is kind of perpetually online and sort of very similarly kind of needs sort of a lot of data processing, high reaction times, really low latency. Just because of sort of like the speed of the global network it operates on. I think we'll kind of see a lot of the leaps and bounds we make in innovation in terms of how AI models are applied and kind of really reducing latency for them. Like we'll see it sort of come to fruition in a space like gaming as well. And I think the second one that is starting to get more attention now is really sort of the idea around physical AI, which was one of the topics that Jensen Huang mentioned in his keynote at NVIDIA GTC as sort of like the next step of evolution beyond sort of agentic AI and sort of, actual like physical AI that exists in physical space, and or, sort of like robots that might exist in the service sector or even in people's homes, right? So I think starting to see AI kind of move away from this sort of semi-abstract concept that exists on the other side of your sort of phone screen or computer screen in the form of a chat GPT chat box into sort of more tangible forms, whether that's in gaming or whether that's in like actual physical world like robotics. I think will be a couple very interesting sectors to keep an eye on as the overall space evolves.
And John, let me ask you this question. Let's say that I'm someone that is interested in joining the network, one of these geniuses that you mentioned, or I'm an institution that's interested in utilizing CrunchDAO. What steps do I take?
Why? So if you are a data scientist, you are just joining us on the Discord, then you just join the platform. We have a platform when you can access the data. We have a complete set of tools and the capability of accessing compute and etc. So that's how you start to jump in. You select one of the use cases that is currently live on the platform, and you try to build the best possible models, eventually starting to earn a reward. On the other side, from the institutional side, we are in a private beta at the moment. So we are still operating on testnet. We had a first audit on testnet, and we are in this private beta. So we are controlling what kind of use case is currently being launched, so we can fully test it, make sure it's working, it's functional. Like Tosif mentioned before, there is a lot of expectation from the customers in terms of availability, right? In terms of speed and latency. Like for example, working with these investment banks means that you have to respond in less than 5 milliseconds. You have to operate a lot of data in the same moment, a lot of models, a lot of compute. It's a full loop that needs to happen in less than 5 milliseconds. And actually every 5 milliseconds. At a 99.99999% of availability, because otherwise you have a bank on the other side that is not going to be able to serve some of its customers. So Crunch is really much in production, and for that reason, we're taking it one step at a time on the institutional side, and we really let only the biggest opportunities for the DAO. So what I mentioned on Forex, what I mentioned on healthcare, what I mentioned with some of the large sovereign wealth funds that are on Crunch. So we really kind of act as a VC. Let's say the core team can kind of select the use case so far, but the goal is to allow Crunch to become permissionless at the moment. So having the community select what use cases they want to really let on. And that's kind of critical for us, because we may, once it's permissionless, what kind of data are we going to work on? Do we want to work on on the weapon kind of data, weapon system kind of data, weapon system kind of AI? And so that is going to be in the end of the community ultimately, and I think that's going to stay like that. For the moment, the core team is kind of playing this game until we are on mainnet and be able to just let anyone push some data and access the collective intelligence of our crowd.
And then Tosif, same question over to you. If I'm a builder in a project like John's, how do I reach out for the GPU network of IO?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few different ways that potential customers or partners can reach out to us and further engage in the ecosystem. I think first and foremost, obviously getting onto the IO Cloud platform, being able to just check out our available GPUs that are distributed globally, and just trying out the platform and seeing what the GPUs you want are available, and try to deploy it within a couple of minutes is probably the easiest way to get involved. Start trying out GPUs and see if we fit your use case. If there's sort of broader needs that potential customers or partners have, always feel free to reach out either directly to me or my team, or contact us through our website. Obviously we have access to over 300,000 plus GPUs across a variety of global suppliers, so I'm sure we'll be able to meet anyone's need when it comes to that. And I think lastly, I'll also mention for sort of AI developers who don't want to go through the trouble of managing their own infrastructure and just want to tap into the latest and greatest sort of open source models from Hugging Face, I'd highly recommend checking out IO Intelligence and either trying out sort of the classic playground chat window that people are used to on with ChatGPT and Claude. But also, if you're a developer, I'd recommend creating your own API keys, plugging it into your AI app of choice, and seeing how it performs when put up against an OpenAI or Anthropic API. So I think those are a few different ways that I'd recommend people get involved and start using our products and getting more involved with the ecosystem.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining the space and chatting about it. We're excited to see where CrunchDAO goes, crunching all the numbers across sectors. And for our community, Tassif was not able to join us due to a technical issue, but we will be taking all the community questions that you've brought to us and we'll be answering them next week. Thanks so much for continuing to send questions. Keep sending them our way and we'll be able to address them. So John, thank you so much for your time. Tassif, thank you for your time as always, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, guys.